An ordinary girl quit her job at the Vampire King's palace. But exactly at midnight, something happened to her that turned her life upside down. The truth she had been running from finally stood right in front of her. And now, either she will accept her destiny, or the Vampire King's secret will be buried forever. The last shift. I'm not proud of how I quit. I didn't slam doors or shout dramatic words. I just left my apron folded on the kitchen hook like a white flag and walked out before anyone could ask me to stay. The Vampire King's castle smelled like cold stone, old books, and a kind of clean darkness, like rain that never reaches the ground. Even the torches seemed to burn quietly there, as if fire itself didn't want to disturb the silence. I had worked those halls for 1 year as a simple night attendant, bringing tea no one drank, polishing silver that never tarnished, and pretending I didn't notice the shadows that moved when nothing else did. My name is Mira. I'm human, and I was hired because the castle wanted someone warm. That's what the steward said. Someone who could stand in a room full of immortals and still smile like tomorrow mattered. The truth is, I needed the job. My father's medicine cost more than my pride, and the castle paid in coin that felt heavier than normal money, as if each piece carried a secret. Still, every night I worked there, I felt like the air was gently pushing me out, reminding me I didn't belong. And then there was the king. King Lucien didn't enter rooms the way other people do. He arrived like a change in weather. The first time I saw him, I forgot to breathe, not because he was frightening, but because he looked tired in a way I recognized. Not the tiredness of a long day, but the tiredness of carrying something you cannot put down. He was pale, yes, and his eyes were the color of winter skies right before snow. But what unsettled me most was the careful way he moved, like he was always trying not to break something fragile, even when he stood completely alone. The servants whispered stories about him when they thought I couldn't hear. "He never feeds," one said, voice shaking. "He does," another corrected, "but only from criminals and raiders, like a judge in the night." I didn't know what to believe. Legends are easy when you're not the one working under their roof. One evening, as I carried a tray of warm bread toward the library, I heard a sound I wasn't supposed to hear in a Vampire King's castle. Crying. Soft, controlled, like someone trying to swallow their grief so it wouldn't be a burden to the world. I froze at the top of the stairs, the bread warming my palms, and I listened. The sound came from behind a half-open door, one that should have been locked. I should have walked away. I should have remembered my place. But kindness is a strange kind of courage. It moves before your mind has time to protect you. I stepped closer and nudged the door with my shoulder. Inside, the library was lit by moonlight spilling through tall, stained glass. Dust floated like tiny stars. And there, on the floor beside an ancient fireplace that hadn't been used in centuries, was King Lucien himself, kneeling like a man who had forgotten he was a king. In his hands, he held a small wooden toy horse. The paint was chipped. The carving was uneven, like it had been made by someone learning. He wasn't crying loudly. His face stayed calm, almost expressionless, but his fingers trembled around the toy as if it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. He looked up and my heart dropped, not because of anger, because of how quickly he tried to hide the pain like he had been punished for it before. "Mira," he said quietly, my name tasting strange in his mouth, like a word from a life he didn't deserve. "You shouldn't be here." I should have apologized. I should have bowed and backed out. Instead, I held out the tray, because it was the only thing I knew how to do. "I heard something," I said, voice smaller than I wanted. "I thought someone might need warmth." For a long moment, he didn't move. The castle seemed to hold its breath with him. Then, to my shock, he reached for the bread, not like a predator, but like a person trying to remember what comfort feels like. He didn't eat. He just held it, letting the steam rise toward his face. "You quit," he said, not accusing, just aware, as if he'd known the moment my apron came off the hook. I swallowed. I did. Why? Because I was afraid of you, I wanted to say. Because I felt small here. Because I can't afford to be brave every night. But the words that came out were different, and somehow truer. Because I started to think this place doesn't need me, I admitted. And maybe I don't deserve the money if all I do is pretend I'm not scared. His gaze softened in a way I didn't expect. It was the look of someone who understood fear intimately, someone who had lived with it long enough to be polite to it. "You deserve more than coin," he murmured. "You deserve peace." The silence after that felt heavy, like a closed fist. I should have left right then, before I got tangled in whatever sadness lived behind his crown. But my eyes kept drifting back to the toy horse in his hands. "Is that yours?" I asked. His fingers tightened. It was someone else. Something in his voice made my chest ache, like he wasn't allowed to say the name, even to himself. Before I could ask more, the air changed, sharp, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. The torches outside the library flickered as if a cold wind swept through the corridors. Lucien's head snapped toward the window. His eyes narrowed, suddenly alert, suddenly not tired at all. "What is it?" I whispered. He stood in one smooth motion, cloak falling into place like a shadow remembering its shape. For a second, the king looked exactly like the rumors, ancient, powerful, untouchable. But when he looked back at me, the compassion was still there, and it made his power feel even more frightening, because it meant he cared. "Midnight is here," he said, voice low, "and tonight the castle will test you." My stomach turned cold. "Test me how?" He didn't answer immediately. He walked closer, and I noticed something I had never noticed before, a faint scar on his wrist, like a chain had once lived there. Then he held out the toy horse, offering it to me as if it was sacred. "If you take this," he said, "you will be seen, not as a servant, not as human, as something else." My hands hovered in the air, unsure. "I don't understand." His jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw fear in the vampire king's eyes. "Neither did I," he whispered, "not until the night I lost everything." Outside, a deep bell began to ring, slow and heavy, 12 times, shaking dust from the rafters. With every toll, the floor beneath us seemed to thrum, like the castle had a heartbeat waking up. Lucien's voice dropped to a near breath. "Tell me now, Mira," he said. "Did you quit because you wanted to leave, or because someone told you to run?" My throat went dry, because suddenly I remembered the strange note I'd found in my pocket that morning, written in ink so dark it looked like old blood. "Leave before midnight, or you will belong to HIM." I stared at the toy horse in his hand, and the bell rang again. And then from the shadow behind the fireplace, a second voice spoke, soft, amused, and far too close. "Too late," the thing behind the fire. The word "too late" didn't echo like a normal voice. It landed in the library like a hand on the back of my neck, warm and possessive, as if the shadows themselves had learned to speak. I backed up until my shoulder brushed a shelf, and several old books shivered in place. King Lucien didn't move toward me. He moved between me and the fireplace, slow and deliberate, like he was placing his body where danger wanted to stand. His cloak barely stirred, but the air around him sharpened, charged with a quiet authority. "Mira," he said without looking away from the darkness, "do not answer it." "It," I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. A thin laugh came from behind the fireplace, playful in a way that made my stomach twist. "It. He says it like I'm a stain on the stone. How humble you've become, Lucien." Lucien's jaw tightened. "You're not welcome here." "Funny," the voice replied, "because I helped build this place. I watched you learn to wear the crown without choking on it." My hands were still hovering in the air, halfway between taking the toy horse and running. The bell outside struck again, another heavy toll, and the moonlight in the stained glass seemed to pulse, as if the castle was counting down with us. I forced myself to breathe and glanced at Lucien's offered hand. The toy horse looked ridiculous against his pale fingers, small, chipped, ordinary. Yet the way he held it was like he was offering me the last piece of himself he trusted. "Why does this matter?" I asked, my eyes stinging with panic and something else I didn't understand yet. "It's just a toy." Lucien's voice was softer, almost pleading. "Because it's a promise." The voice in the shadows sighed theatrically. "Oh, don't make it poetic. She's human. She came for coin." Something hot flared in me at that, anger, sharp and sudden, the kind that surprises you because it proves you're not as helpless as you thought. I lifted my chin. "I came for my father," I said. "For medicine, for time." The library went still. Even the voice seemed briefly curious. Lucien finally glanced at me, and I saw it again. That hidden compassion, the strange gentleness of a king who carried his power like a burden. He didn't pity me. Somehow that made it worse. He understood. The shadow behind the fireplace shifted, and a figure began to peel itself away from the dark as if it was stepping out of wet paint. It wasn't a monster in the way stories promise monsters will be. It was worse than that. It looked like a man. Well-dressed, calm, a smile that belonged in a courtroom, not a castle. His hair was black, his eyes bright with amusement, and his presence made the room feel smaller, like it wanted to fold around him and hide. He tipped his head in a mock bow. "Mira, is it? You're early. Usually humans don't meet me until they've made their first mistake." Lucien's voice turned to ice. "Edrin." Edrin spread his hands like a friendly host. "Let's not do titles. You know I hate formalities." My heart hammered. I didn't understand how I knew it, but I felt the truth of it in my bones. Edrin wasn't just another vampire. He was something older. Something that had learned to disguise hunger as charm. "What do you want?" I demanded, surprised to hear steel in my own voice. Edrin's gaze flicked to me, then to Lucien. "What I always want. Balance. Payment. The castle is full of old promises, Mira. This place runs on them. Every stone has a bargain inside." Lucien's fingers curled around the toy horse until his knuckles whitened. "She has nothing to do with your bargain." "Oh," Edrin's smile widened. "Then why does the castle react to her? Why do the bells ring for a servant who quit?" My mind raced back to the note in my pocket. I dug it out with trembling fingers, the paper suddenly feeling heavier than it should have. I held it out. "I found this," I said. "I thought it was a threat. Now I'm not sure who it's from." Edrin leaned forward slightly, eyes glittering. "Delightful handwriting, not mine." Lucien didn't reach for the note. His gaze locked on it like it was a blade. "It's from someone inside the castle." The idea made my skin crawl. I'd always assumed the danger in the Vampire King's castle was outside the doors, beyond the iron gates. I hadn't considered that the castle itself might be divided, quiet wars fought in whispers and sealed rooms. A small sound broke through the tension. A sneeze. It came from behind a curtain near the far wall, and it was followed by a muffled curse. The curtain rustled, and out stumbled a young guard with a mop of hair and a face that screamed guilt. He was holding a broom like a sword. Your Majesty," he blurted, eyes wide. I was guarding very intensely." Lucien didn't even blink. "Rowan." Rowan flinched. "Yes, that's me, loyal, present, not hiding behind curtains." Edrin looked delighted. "Oh, good, an audience." Rowan glanced at me, then at Edrin, then at Lucien. "So, just checking, is this the part where I run or the part where I faint?" Despite myself, a tiny laugh escaped me, One short breath that felt like relief cracking through the terror. Rowan's absurd honesty made the room feel human for 1 second, and that second mattered. Lucien's mouth twitched, barely. The closest thing to a smile I'd seen on him. It was gone just as quickly, but it was real. I held on to that. Edrin noticed, of course. His amusement sharpened. "How precious," he murmured. "You've learned to collect little lights, Lucien. A servant, a clown of a guard. Is that what immortality has become for you?" Lucien's voice stayed controlled, but it carried the weight of a storm held back by willpower alone. "Say what you came to say." Edrin's eyes flicked to the stained glass, where the moon sat perfectly centered, watching like an unblinking witness. "Midnight is a doorway," he said. "And tonight the castle chooses a heart to bind to it. That's how it stays alive. That's how it stays protected." My stomach dropped. A heart. Rowan squeaked. "Sorry, bind. Like metaphorically. Please say metaphorically." Edrin ignored him. "Long ago," he continued, voice smooth as silk, "Lucien made a bargain to protect his people. Noble, really. He offered the castle something it could anchor itself to." Lucien's hand trembled. Just once. Then he steadied it like he'd trained himself for centuries to be still. Edrin's smile widened. "He offered his future." I blinked. What does that mean? Lucien finally spoke to me directly, and his eyes were so full of regret that it felt like being apologized to by someone who didn't believe forgiveness was possible. "It means," he said quietly, "that if the castle binds to you, you will not be allowed to leave." The room tilted. My knees threatened to fold. Rowan stepped closer, suddenly less comedic, more protective. "Your Majesty, with respect, that's insane. We can just unbind it, cut a rope, break a spell, throw something holy at it." Edrin laughed, genuinely entertained. "Oh, the optimism of the living." I took a step back, shaking my head. "No, I didn't sign up for this. I quit. I left my apron." "The castle doesn't care about aprons," Edrin said lightly. "It cares about choice. It cares about the moment someone decides to run and still stays." Lucien's gaze softened with pain. "Mira, listen to me. If you walk out that door before the final bell, you'll be safe. I will make sure of it." "How?" I demanded, tears burning hot. "You can't even control your own castle." That hit him. I saw it in the way his shoulders tightened, in the way his eyes flickered downward like he'd been struck by a truth he already hated. Edrin leaned in, voice turning intimate, cruel in its gentleness. "Tell her, Lucien. Tell her what happens when you fight the castle." Lucien's fingers loosened around the toy horse. The small wooden thing slid into my palm before I realized I'd reached for it. It was warm, absurdly warm, like it had been held by sunlight once. The second it touched my skin, the bells outside changed tone. The sound deepened, as if the castle recognized my heartbeat and answered it. The moonlight flared across the stained glass, and for a split second, images moved inside it, like memories caught in colored shards. I saw a child running through these halls. I saw Lucien kneeling, offering the same toy horse to someone much smaller. I saw chains on his wrist, fresh and cruel. I saw Lucien screaming without sound as the castle sealed its doors. I gasped and nearly dropped the toy. Lucien's eyes widened, not with anger, fear. "You saw," he whispered. "You saw it." Rowan stared at me. "Mira, your eyes are glowing." I pressed a hand to my face, trembling. The air tasted like metal and rain. The toy horse pulsed in my palm like a second heartbeat. Edrin's expression turned satisfied, like a man watching a trap click shut. "Well," he said softly, "the castle has chosen." Lucien stepped forward, voice breaking just enough to ruin the kingly calm. "No, not her." The final bell began to rise. The last toll before midnight passed completely, and the library doors slammed shut on their own with a thunderous finality. Rowan grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't budge. Rowan said, panic climbing into his voice. Bad news. The castle just locked us in. The stained glass window darkened, the moon vanishing behind a sudden sheet of cloud. In the fireplace, cold black fire ignited without heat, crawling upward like a living shadow. Edrin's smile sharpened. Now, he murmured, we see what kind of heart you have, Mira. Lucien reached for my hand, not to claim me but to steady me, and when his fingers touched mine, the toy horse flared with light. Not moonlight. Something older. Something that felt like a promise being awakened. And in the sudden hush that followed, a child's voice whispered from somewhere inside the walls, clear as a bell and close enough to make my blood run cold. Lucien, you came back. Lucien froze, and the color drained from his face. Because the voice didn't belong to the living. And I realized, with horror and heartbreak, that the castle wasn't trying to trap me. It was trying to bring someone home, the promise that breaks the curse. The child's voice didn't fade like an echo. It stayed, gentle and steady, as if the castle itself was speaking through a memory it had kept warm for centuries. Lucien stood perfectly still, the way people do when they're afraid that one wrong breath will turn hope into dust. His fingers were still around mine, not gripping, just holding on like he needed proof that something real existed in this room. Who are you? I whispered to the walls, though my throat felt tight enough to split. The black fire in the fireplace swayed, and the library's shadows leaned inward, listening. Then the voice came again, softer. I'm the one he promised. Rowan stopped yanking the door and turned slowly toward us, his joking face gone. Okay, he said under his breath. That is officially the worst sentence I've ever heard in a castle. Edrin's expression looked almost reverent now, like this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Ah, he murmured. There you are, little heart of the house. Lucien's eyes flashed. Do not speak to him. Him, Edrin repeated, savoring the word. So you finally admit it. You finally say it out loud. My stomach nodded. Lucien, who is he? Lucien's gaze dropped to the toy horse glowing between our hands. The light wasn't bright in a blinding way. It was warm, like a lantern in fog. It made the library feel less like a prison and more like a room where truth could survive. Lucien swallowed. His name was Elias, he said, voice rough with old grief. A human child, an orphan. I found him outside the gates during a winter that would have killed him. He was brave enough to knock anyway. I couldn't stop imagining it. A child in the snow, knocking on the door of a vampire king because he had nowhere else to go. Rowan's brows lifted, stunned. You took him in. Lucien nodded once. He made the castle feel less cursed. He laughed in my halls. He argued with my stewards. He fed crumbs to the bats and called them sky mice. His mouth tightened as if the memory hurt to hold. He asked me if I ever smiled. A strange warmth pressed behind my eyes. This wasn't the Lucien of rumors. This was a man who had once tried, quietly, to build something gentle in a world that expected him to be cruel. Edrin's voice slid in like a blade wrapped in velvet. And then you made a bargain. Lucien's shoulders tensed. I made a choice. Edrin's smile widened. You offered the castle a future so your people would be safe from hunters, from famine, from war. You chained your own fate to these stones. His eyes flicked to the black fire. But the castle is an old thing. It wants devotion. It wants a living heartbeat to anchor the vow. My chest tightened. So Elias. Lucien's gaze turned glassy. He didn't deny it. I didn't understand what I was doing, he whispered. I thought I was giving the castle a guardian bond, a blessing. I didn't know it would take him, fold him into its walls like a secret. The child's voice returned, close and calm. It wasn't your fault, Lucien. I didn't feel pain. I felt lonely. Rowan pressed a hand to his mouth, like he was trying not to make a sound and fail at being strong. Edrin took a slow step forward. "And now the castle has found a new key," he said, eyes glittering as he looked at me. "Mira, a warm heart, a human thread, perfect for pulling old doors open." I stepped back instinctively, but Lucien stayed beside me, as if my fear was something he would share rather than command away. "You wanted me to quit," I said, the pieces clicking together with sick clarity. "The note, someone wanted me out before midnight." Edrin's eyes flicked toward Rowan for half a second, too quick for a confession, too obvious to ignore. Rowan's face went pale. No, I did write a note, but listen." Lucien's gaze snapped to him, sharp as winter. "Rowan." Rowan lifted both hands. "I saw you watching her, Your Majesty, not like a predator, like someone drowning sees a rope, and I panicked." His voice cracked. "I thought if she left, you'd be safer. I thought if she left, the castle wouldn't choose her." My anger flared, but it softened as fast as it rose, because I could see the truth. Rowan was clumsy, scared, and trying to do the right thing in a place where the right thing is hard to recognize. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at me like he expected me to hate him. "I didn't know it would lock you in." Edrin clapped slowly. "Touching, a loyal guard with a conscience, you don't see that often." Lucien's voice lowered. "Edrin, you've manipulated this long enough. End it." "Gladly," Edrin said. "Here is the simple truth, Mira. The castle will bind someone at midnight. Either it binds you, fresh heart, fresh fuel, and Lucien keeps his crown with a convenient human anchor." He tilted his head. "Or Lucien breaks the bargain and the castle loses its protection. His people become prey again." Rowan stared at Lucien. "That's not a choice." "It's a trap," I whispered, my hands shaking. The toy horse pulsed in my palm like it was listening to my fear. "You want him forced into sacrificing me or sacrificing his kingdom?" Edrin's smile didn't waver. "I want balance, a bargain paid." Lucien looked at me then, and the emotion in his face was so raw it almost didn't belong on a king. He didn't look at me like a solution. He looked at me like a person he couldn't bear to lose. "I will not sacrifice you," he said, every word heavy, "even if it costs me everything." The black fire surged higher, and the library shook as if the castle disliked hearing that. Edrin's expression sharpened. "Careful, Lucien. Humility looks good on you, but martyrdom makes you predictable." Lucien turned to me, voice urgent but gentle. "Mira, when the light flares again, you must throw the toy horse into the fire." My eyes widened. "What will that do?" "It was the first promise," he said. "The first bond. If we break it at the source, the castle's grip weakens." Rowan frowned. "Or it explodes, just saying." Lucien didn't smile, but something warmer flickered in his eyes. "Your honesty is noted." I stared at the black fire. Something about it felt hungry, but not in a bloody way, hungry like loneliness, like an emptiness that had been fed the wrong things for too long. It didn't want to kill. It wanted to keep. And suddenly I understood something that made my chest ache. The castle wasn't evil. It was abandoned. A home built on fear will always demand more fear. A home built on love learns to let go. The final toll of midnight trembled through the walls, and the fire leapt, reaching, curling toward me like a hand begging not to be left alone. Elia's voice whispered, right beside my ear. "Mira, I don't want you to stay like I did." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. "Elia's, where are you?" "In the stone," he breathed. "In the promise, in the part of the king that never forgave himself." Lucien's face twisted, and for the first time his control cracked completely. "Elias, I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't understand." The shadows in the library shifted, and for a heartbeat I saw him. Not fully, but enough. A small shape made of moonlight and memory, standing near the fireplace with the posture of a child trying to be brave. Rowan's voice shook. He's real. Edrin's gaze flashed with annoyance. Sentiment is not a spell. But it was, I realized, not the kind Edrin respected, the kind that changes people. Lucien turned to me. Mira, please, if you trust me at all. I looked at him, really looked. A king who could have taken whatever he wanted and instead learned restraint. A monster in stories who, in truth, had been trying to be better than his nature for longer than I'd been alive. And in that moment, I understood the deepest twist of all. He wasn't hiding compassion to appear powerful. He was hiding compassion because it hurt. I trust you, I said, and it surprised me how steady my voice became. But I'm not going to be another thing you lose. Lucien froze. Mira. I stepped forward toward the fire, toy horse in both hands. My heart pounded so hard I thought the castle might hear it and claim it. The heatless black flames swayed, eager. Edrin's voice sharpened. You don't know what you're doing. I think I do, I said, and even I heard the bravery in it. The kind of bravery that's mostly fear, carried anyway. I held the toy horse out, and the glow strengthened, filling the library with warm gold light. The fire hissed and recoiled as if offended by kindness. Elias' voice trembled. That was my horse. I know, I whispered, and I'm going to give it back to you. Lucien's breath caught. Mira, if you do this. If I do this, I said without looking back, then you stop letting guilt be your crown. For a second, everything went quiet, like even the castle was listening. Then I threw the toy horse into the black fire. The flames didn't explode. They changed. The darkness rippled, and the black burned away like ink washed from cloth. The fire turned pale, then soft, then warm, like ordinary flame remembering its true purpose. The library filled with the scent of cedar and old paper instead of cold metal, and the air loosened in my lungs. A wind swept through the shelves, pages fluttering like wings. The stained glass brightened, and moonlight poured in clean and clear. The door handle behind Rowan clicked, as if the castle had just unlocked itself out of shame. Edrin's smile faltered. No. Lucien staggered back one step, staring at the fireplace as if he couldn't believe the room was allowing him to breathe. And then Elias appeared, not as a ghost meant to terrify, but as a child-shaped presence of light, whole and gentle, standing where the fire had been darkest. He looked at Lucien with a brave little tilt of his chin. You kept the promise, Elias said. You came back. Lucien fell to his knees without thinking, crown and pride forgotten. Elias. Elias walked forward and placed a hand of light against Lucien's cheek. You don't have to punish yourself anymore. Lucien's face crumpled. He didn't sob loudly. He just broke, quietly, the way strong people do when they finally realize they're allowed to be human inside. His voice was barely a whisper. I tried to be good, he said. I know, Elias replied. That's why I waited. Behind us, Edrin's expression turned cold. This isn't how bargains work. Lucien rose slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand like he was embarrassed by his own tears. But when he looked at Edrin now, his gaze held something new. Not fury. Freedom. The bargain is paid, Lucien said calmly. Not with a stolen heart, with a returned one. Edrin's eyes narrowed. You think kindness breaks chains? Lucien stepped closer, voice steady. No, courage does. Kindness just gives you a reason to be brave. Rowan, who had been silent for too long, cleared his throat and lifted his broom again, shakily. And, for the record, I'm on Team Courage. Also Team not dying in a library. Edrin looked at Rowan like he was something unpleasant on a shoe. Then his gaze returned to me. You're very brave for someone so small. I met his eyes, my fear still there but no longer steering the wheel. I'm not brave because I'm not scared, I said. I'm brave because I'm done letting fear choose for me. The castle rumbled, not angry this time, almost approving. Edrin's mouth tightened. You've changed the rules. No, Lucien corrected. She reminded the castle why it exists. A home is not a cage. For the first time, Edrin looked uncertain, like he'd built his whole life on the assumption that love was weak, and didn't know how to fight something he couldn't corrupt. He took a step back, shadows tugging at him like a cloak. This is not finished, he warned. Lucien didn't lunge or threaten. He simply opened his palm toward the library doors, and the newly warm fire flared behind him like a quiet sunrise. It is finished, Lucien said, for tonight. Edrin vanished into the shadows with a hiss of displaced air, like a candle blown out. Silence returned, real silence, not the tense quiet of fear. The library felt lighter, as if something that had been clenched for centuries had finally let go. Rowan exhaled hard. Okay, weird night. On the bright side, I did not faint. Elias glanced at me and his light softened. Thank you, he said. You didn't take what was offered, you gave something back. My throat tightened. What happens to you now? Elias smiled, small and peaceful. I get to go where I was supposed to go. Lucien stepped forward, voice shaking. Do I get to say goodbye? Elias nodded. Yes. Lucien leaned down, forehead touching the child's glowing hair the way a father might, the way a king with a broken heart might. I'm sorry, he whispered again, but this time it sounded less like punishment and more like healing. Elias' light began to rise, gentle as mist. Before he faded, he looked back at Lucien one last time. Smile, he said simply. Just once, so I can take it with me. Lucien's face trembled, and then slowly, painfully, honestly, he smiled. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced. It was real. Elias nodded, satisfied, and the light lifted into the ceiling and vanished like a star returning to the sky. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lucien turned to me, and the king looked different. Still pale, still powerful, but no longer trapped inside himself. He held my gaze with a humility that made my chest ache. You saved my castle, he said, and you saved me from the worst part of me. I didn't save you alone, I replied, wiping my face. You chose not to use me. That's what saved you. Rowan sniffed dramatically. I'm not crying. The library is dusty. Lucien actually let out a quiet laugh, soft, surprised, like he'd forgotten he could. The sound changed the room more than any magic. I took a steady breath. So, am I still trapped here? Lucien looked toward the doors. They stood open now, the corridor beyond lit by calm torchlight. No, he said, you are free. My heart twisted in a way that scared me, because freedom was what I thought I wanted. But standing there, feeling the warmth in the air and seeing the gentleness in his eyes, I realized something else had grown quietly between fear and midnight. Connection. I stepped closer, voice careful. My father still needs medicine. Lucien nodded immediately. He will have it, not as payment for your courage, as a gift, because your life matters. I hesitated. And what do you need? He looked at the place where Elias had vanished. To rebuild, he said. To lead without chains, to earn trust, not demand silence. Rowan lifted a finger. Also, we might need to repair the fireplace, just a note. Lucien glanced at him. You will supervise. Rowan's eyes widened. Me, supervis, yes, your majesty, absolutely. I am very supervisable. I turned toward the open doors, the cold night air calling softly. I could leave. I should leave. But I looked back at Lucien, the vampire king who had hidden compassion like a wound, who had been tested by power and chose humility instead. I realized the message midnight had carved into me. Some prisons are made of stone. The worst ones are made of guilt. And the bravest thing you can do is stop paying for an old mistake with a new person's life. I walked to the doorway, then paused. I did quit, I said, half smiling through the leftover tears. But I'm willing to come back on new terms. Lucien's brow lifted slightly. New terms. I nodded. No more secrets that hurt people. If I work here, it's because I choose it. And if I stay, it's because this place becomes something better than it was. Rowan whispered loudly. She's negotiating with a vampire king. I love her. Lucien looked at me for a long moment, and then he bowed his head, not as a ruler granting permission, but as a man accepting accountability. Agreed, he said. And Mira, thank you for seeing me as more than a monster. I stepped into the corridor, feeling the castle around us. Not hungry now, but quiet, like a home learning a new habit. Behind us, the moon broke free of the clouds, bright and clean. The bells were silent at last. And somewhere deep in the stone, I could almost swear I heard laughter, small and childlike, finally at peace.